From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here, and here's today's lineup. Another featured speaker from that Kansas Agricultural Technologies Conference out of Oklahoma State University, Brian Arnall, will take a look at the data that make variable rate nitrogen applications work for the producer. Then a preview of two events to be hosted by the K-State Animal Sciences and Industry Department. Mike Tokach looks ahead to the 2018 Swine Profitability Conference set for early February. And with the details on the 2018 K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy for Youth, Sharon Breiner. Further ahead, K-State's Charlie Lee talks about pasture patch burn grazing and the ensuing impact on prairie chicken populations. Here on Agriculture Today.
What is radon? Home exposure to radon gas is the leading cause of lung cancer death in the United States for non-smokers. In Kansas, 1 in 4 homes will test at or above the EPA action level. The Surgeon General recommends all homes be tested and fixed if necessary. Visit kansasradonprogram.org for more information. Test, fix, save a life. This message brought to you by the Kansas Radon Program, the Kansas Association of Broadcasters, and this station.
The 2018 Kansas Agricultural Technologies Conference came to a close last Friday afternoon in Junction City. This was the 21st such conference, co-sponsored, as usual, by K-State Research and Extension and the Kansas Ag Research and Technology Association, known as CARTA for short. This was another exceptional conference. Over 200 producers gathering there to take in some really cutting-edge thinking and research results covering just about anything you can think of in the realm of precision agricultural technology. If you were tuned in last Friday, you heard from one of the speakers, Jason Ward, out of North Carolina State University. He passed along ideas on maximizing the use of all of that field and equipment operation data that current technology can generate. Here we bring you another of the presentations out of a land-grant university. This one got into the approaches to variable rate nitrogen applications to crop ground. The speaker was soil scientist Brian Arnall of Oklahoma State University, and he was asking the audience to rethink how they approach making nitrogen application decisions and how variable rate might pay off, even though over the years, numerous producers have more or less shied away from variable rate N. And why is that? Well, Brian offered up some thoughts.
You know, this is just my opinion, but when you look at nitrogen management and crop production, you have an input that's significantly cheaper than our output. So in any environment where you're risk adverse to the loss of a yield of a bushel, losing 1 bushel, it's always safer to make sure you have enough there. And so once you introduce variable rate, you are reducing or increasing the rate across the landscape. And that introduces variability, and to some people it introduces risk. I don't know if I'm okay with dropping back. And some of the technologies actually make the producers completely change their frame of mind, moving from pre-plant into heavy in season. And the removal of that pre-plant application is hard for some people to deal with.
Is the situation changing, though, in that the available information that can go into a variable rate decision might alleviate some of that risk?
As we increase the ability to obtain good site-specific data, we're getting a lot better job to do variable rate and reduce that risk. And so really now there's a lot of technologies that can do a very good job of variable rate. As much as anything, it's that mental leap to changing what we've been done because it's always been safe. Even soil scientists, soil fertility specialists gave the 90 percentile, 95 percentile that this rate will maximize yield 95% of the time, so let's just go that. Now we're saying, we can draw back here and do that. It's tough.
One of the components here, and you noted this in your presentation, the optimal rate decision-making here, and that optimum from the economic standpoint, as the data that you shared implies, can widely range and therefore makes this even more complicated.
Yeah, so if you look at optimum rate, whether it comes from Kansas State data with Dr. Mangle or Oklahoma State data, in any given crop you can have a 40 to 100-pound swing from one year to the next and even across the field. And so managing that kind of shift both temporally and spatially is a great challenge.
That's the challenge at hand then. But you also talked about data sources and utilizing those sources and general informative sources that might make variable rate applications more palatable to the producer. You might talk about those.
And so as we get more data, we have the nitrogen models. Producers are more likely to put on weather stations on their own farms, and as that technology is becoming much more cost effective. Having that information about the soil and environment, whether it's from sensors, remote imagery, what bit. We have more information about the corn crop from aerial imagery, from yield monitor data. The soil sensors are giving us a better concept of change of organic matter across the field. All those layers can go into the base equation for nitrogen, which is the nitrogen rate needed is a component of how much nitrogen is in the crop, how much nitrogen will be supplied by the soil, and then there's an efficiency factor for about the fertilizer you use. So if you take those three aspects in, all these data layers can go in to improve your accuracy of your N rate recommendation.
That is really at hand now. This is not something over the horizon. This information is very much at the access of the producer.
Absolutely. There's several commercial groups that are providing variable rate technologies right now, variable rate recommendations, whether it's based upon modeling or in situ sensing or remote imagery.
Where does such almost seemingly elementary procedures as soil testing fit into the whole notion of variable rate?
On the nitrogen side, soil testing is much less used now than it has ever been. But it's still an extremely important component. For one, is backgrounding that organic matter. Knowing what your organic matter is and tying that to the sensor is important. But I also like the pre-plant soil testing because it gives me that snapshot in time. I know at least at this point in time where I start. And then using the information I collect throughout the season, I can adjust that level based upon rainfall or temperature.
So don't chuck soil testing to the side is your message.
Don't chuck soil testing. We still need it.
And you also strongly pressed a couple of times in your presentation how valuable it can be for the producer to conduct reference strips of, well, not just nitrogen, but other elements, P and K likewise. Explain that further.
So I really think we have an opportunity, especially with the technology we have, to put scripts into applicators or just get push spreaders. I like to see high rates and low rates of any nutrient we have interest in right outside in your field, something you can look at it daily. And guess what? If you put more nitrogen in an area that's 10 foot wide by 100 foot long and it shows up, you know you need to fertilize the rest of the field. Same thing with phosphorus and potassium.
Of course, a lot of producers don't like to go to the trouble or what they might perceive to be the sacrifice of those strips, but you think that's worthwhile.
We do. We've got a bunch of producers in Oklahoma. We run over 1 million acres of enriched strips. Most of those don't see the green seeker that go along, but just because the enriched strip has taken off so much. OSU doesn't apply a single acre of those. This is all producers. So I've got more than a fair share of producers that go over more than 2,000 to 3,000 acres of wheat every single year with one of these reference strips, and most of them are doing the same thing in sorghum.
Any other lead considerations on ramping up one's variable rate nitrogen applications that need to be passed along here?
Look at all the different components. Remember the three primary components: nitrogen in the crop, nitrogen in the soil, and efficiency. And when you look at a variable rate program, see what that program is hitting on. Most will focus on yield, soil, or efficiency. And is that the right for your environment? Does your environment have bigger change in yield or the bigger change in what the soil is providing? And fit it to your system, because not every model works everywhere, but one will work somewhere.
And we'll close on this, that one variable that's still elusive, what the weather is going to do. Even then, there are technologies coming along that may not help a producer predict the weather, but at least gauge what has happened site-specifically in the field, and that can be valuable.
The site-specific weather data can be extremely important, especially tied with a pre-plant soil test, because I know what the nitrate is, I know what I've applied, and using the weather data, temperature, and rainfall, we can tie that back to models and just agronomics and get an idea of what's happening to nitrogen in that system. And without the site-specific weather data or good weather models, we don't have that.
Amalgamating all of this information, bottom line, is worthwhile, you think, to the producer in more effectively utilizing variable rate.
Absolutely. Data is an opportunity to be a tool. Data has its place. There's some tools that will work better for others and some that will work less.
The presentation was great at the conference, Brian, and we do appreciate the summarization of it right here. Thank you, and good luck as you continue to study this area.
Thank you very much.
That's Oklahoma State University soil scientist Brian Arnall, who spoke on the promise of variable rate nitrogen applications and the technologies to achieve that variable rate in at the 2018 Kansas Agricultural Technologies Conference, again taking place last week and co-sponsored by the Kansas Ag Research and Technology Association, CARTA, and K-State Research and Extension. A very successful event it was, once again. And this isn't the only such informational opportunity that K-State and CARTA team up on. In fact, they've another on the slate for February the 23rd, where they will be hosting a workshop on crop imaging and crop scouting. This will take place in Dodge City, and participants will gain insight on the crop problems that can be managed through crop scouting, the pros and cons of crop scouting using UAVs or drones, as well as satellite imagery, what to look for in that crop imagery to identify problems in one's field, and the devices and tools on the market for collecting on-farm crop imagery. There will be representatives from industry as well as from academia to guide that discussion and provide insight into the various forms of crop scouting available. Registration for this session is due by February the 20th. Participation is free for current CARTA members. Non-members can attend for a $25 fee. That'll include lunch and refreshments. Once more, K-State Research and Extension and the Kansas Ag Research and Technology Association pairing up to host a workshop on crop imaging and crop scouting. Friday, February the 23rd at the CropQuest headquarters in Dodge City. Register as soon as possible, and you can do so online at cartaonline.org, KARTA online.org. At that same website, you can find out about the Kansas Ag Research and Technology Association itself and how to become more involved in that if you, as a producer, are so inclined. You're listening to Agriculture Today. We'll take a break now and then be back with more here on the K-State Radio Network. Agricultural producers, landowners, and creditors, you have a partner in your legal and financial needs. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services offers reliable, trusted information and guidance. Whether you need advice for ag credit concerns or are transitioning your operation to the next owner, Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services can assist you in making sound decisions for your business. To learn more, call 800-321-3276 or visit us online. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today. Our aim on this next segment is to remind you pork producers of that key event coming up here on the K-State campus in early February. This is the 2018 Swine Profitability Conference. It's one of the featured events here for the swine producer at K-State every year, and they put together, once more, another fine lineup. Along with us now is Mike Tokach, Research and Extension Swine Specialist at K-State, who eagerly awaits and looks forward to this event each year. And Mike, just to remind folks of the purpose of this program, it's different from the Swine Day that takes place at K-State in the fall, correct?
Yes. At Swine Day, we unveil all of our recent research and try to update the industry on what we've been up to in the previous year. With the Profitability Conference, we really focus on just what that title says, on profitability of pork producers, and try to talk about some of the major trends going on in the industry, some of the big picture items, as well as some take-home points that they can take home and apply immediately.
So it is a varied program in that respect, and we want to walk through what will happen on Tuesday the 6th at the Stanley Stout Center here on the campus. By the way, we'll repeat those details in just a few moments. There are a couple of presentations that address the issue of antibiotic use in pork production. What's on the agenda, Mike?
Yes, we start off the program at 9:30 in the morning with Doug McDougall. And Doug is a veterinarian from Canada. He's from Ontario and works with a number of producers both in Canada and in the United States. And he's worked with a lot of producers on minimizing antibiotic use to meet some of the new regulations that have been put in place, but also to help producers that are choosing to produce antibiotic-free pork. And so helping them with how to set up their program, what other things they need to do and to think about in terms of the biosecurity side, in terms of reducing the other input costs while they're trying to produce pigs with minimal or no antibiotics. And so he's going to explain to us how that's done and how he's worked with his different clients to make that happen. And then the second presentation follows up that in terms of actually producing antibiotic-free pork, and this is Ben Woolley. Ben is a producer from Calgary, Canada, actually, is where he's based out of, but they finish a lot of pigs in South Dakota and northwest Iowa. And some of our producers would realize that northwest Iowa tends to be an area where we think of having a lot of disease pressure because of a lot of pigs. And they're actually producing antibiotic-free pigs in that area. And so I think that'll be extremely interesting for our producers to understand how they're going about making that happen.
Great. So you'll have the practitioners as well as the producers' points of view on this very important matter of antibiotic use in hog production. You'll also, on the morning program, you say, Mike, have one of the leading pork producers from the state of Kansas speaking about an unfortunate experience that his operation has gone through, quite frankly, a disaster, and how to recover from that. Talk more about that.
Yes, and one of the things we always try to highlight the Profitability Conference with is one of our Kansas producers talking about their own operation. And in this case, Terry Nelson, producer from Long Island, Kansas, up in the north central part of the state, he had a devastating fire that went through one of his sow farms, and he's going to explain to us how he will go about rebuilding from that catastrophe, the steps that he went through in terms of working with his builders, working with his veterinarians, working with his nutritionist, Bob Goodman, and our staff in terms of trying to figure out what steps he should take, how he should take that disaster and try to turn it into something positive and making strategic long-term decisions while on the fly dealing with a major disaster like happened to him.
His story more than worthwhile to take in as part of the program at Swine Profitability Conference. There'll be the pork lunch, as always, on site, and then into the afternoon, you've invited an individual in from the industry to look at the future of pork production, in effect.
Yes, Dr. Gary Lewis is one of the executives with Seaboard Foods, and I've known Gary for a number of years. He was a swine nutritionist by training from University of Nebraska and started out working in the trenches at Seaboard and now is in their leadership team. He's going to talk about the future trends impacting the swine industry, and he's got a unique aspect growing up in production to now working with one of the largest production systems in the United States that also is an integrated system through the packing plant, so can speak from the live side and through the packing plant and the marketing of pork and what's going on, not the trends not only here in the United States but worldwide in terms of what our consumers and our customers are asking for.
So he'll have perspectives that will, again, be worthwhile of the producer to take in. So that'll start the afternoon program, and then it'll conclude recognizing another individual who has contributed mightily to the swine industry here in the state of Kansas for decades.
Yes, Dr. Steve Henry was a veterinarian that started in practice here, I believe, in 1971. So he practiced in Kansas for an awful long time, worked with almost all of our producers across the state in some capacity over the years, plus is well known internationally. He's also an adjunct professor here at the university in the vet school, had just a wealth of experience. The last presentation of the day, we're really honoring some of his legacy and some of the things that he taught the industry over the years. We asked his partner in practice, Dr. Lisa Tokach, to lead that presentation, talking about life lessons learned while practicing with Dr. Henry. And she's been gathering stories from a number of his clients and from others in the practice that I think it's going to be not only an educational hour to hear about some of the things that we've learned from Dr. Henry, but also a very fun and enjoyable hour.
That'll be a great way to cap off what will be an excellent day for our pork producers on February the 6th. So, Mike, how do individuals register for the 2018 Swine Profitability Conference?
Well, you can register online at ksuswine.org. If you just go to ksuswine.org, you can find the link to the Swine Profitability Conference and register right there. Or if you want to register by phone, you can call Lois Schreiner at 532-1267. That's 785-532-1267, and Lois will take care of you.
And if one registers by the pre-registration date, they get quite a break on the fee, don't they?
Yes, it's $25 to register by January 26th, and then $50 if you register late. So we really would encourage people to register by January 26th to help us with planning especially for the number of meals needed for the day.
Especially considering that pre-registration fee. That's a bargain for the program that you'll take in on the 6th. So once more, this is one of the lead events for you pork producers out of the Animal Sciences and Industry Department at K-State each year, the 2018 Swine Profitability Conference on Tuesday, February the 6th at the Stanley Stout Center on campus. Mike, best of luck with the program, and thanks for the preview.
All right, thank you, Eric.
That from Research and Extension Swine Specialist at K-State, Mike Tokach. Register for this event no later than January the 26th for the early registration break at ksuswine.org. Or call Lois Schreiner directly on the campus. Her number is 785-532-1267, 785-532-1267. While we have a few moments ahead of the break, we do want to plug in a word about another event coming up, sponsored by the Animal Sciences and Industry Department at K-State. And this is for youth with an interest in the livestock industry and related careers. The 10th Annual K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy. It'll take place in early June, but applications are being taken now for filling up that class of 20 young people. The coordinator of the Animal Sciences Leadership Academy is Sharon Breiner.
We have a twofold goal for the program. We want to increase their animal science knowledge as well as work on their personal leadership development. And we feel that we're really able to accomplish that through our 4-day, 3-night program that we have here on our K-State campus.
They are brought to Weber Hall and Arena and are exposed to a wide array of things, actually, right?
Absolutely. We do tours throughout not only our campus, but off to our campus farms and all around the area. We take a bus tour one day and go out and see some other businesses and operations and really try to offer our students a diversity of not only species, but type of operation, size, and a lot of things to really help open their eyes to what is available in the animal science field.
And then you weave into that leadership skill development, right?
Definitely, yes. We know that it's crucial for our students to have those skills, and that's the type of thing employers are looking for in the people that they hire, is not just these knowledge points, but are they able to exercise leadership in their daily lives? And so we have faculty come from the School of Leadership Studies, the Staley School of Leadership here at K-State, to work with our students. We talk about our students' individual strengths. We use a program called Strengths Quest in order to do that, to really help them see what their strengths are in, and then they're able to apply that to their different areas of work. We take our students traditionally up to the challenge course, give them an opportunity to think about teamwork outside of the context of just who they know in their high school, but then bringing them to a different location to work with other people is really important. And then another way that we really weave those two things together is we offer a team problem throughout the week. So the students are put into small groups. They work on that team problem throughout the week. They learn some leadership there by working in a group of people that they don't know well. And then they present that at our final closing ceremony, or kind of our closing graduation with them, to their parents, our faculty, some members of the community, and our Livestock and Meat Industry Council sponsors. That's
Sharon Breiner, the coordinator of the 2018 K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy. It'll take place from Wednesday, June the 6th through Saturday, June the 9th on the K-State campus. Applications are due by April the 2nd, but those are rather detailed in their orientation, so young people should not put off this opportunity. To learn more about the program and how to apply, go to www.youthlivestock.ksu.edu. Once more, youth livestock, all one word, .ksu.edu. You're listening to Agriculture Today. We'll be back after this break with more here on the K-State Radio Network.
Hamburgers, roast, ribs, steak, or whatever you prefer. Beef, it's what's for dinner. Kansas cattle farmers produce 7.5 million head of cattle per year. It takes about 7 tablespoons of peanut butter to get the same amount of protein in 1 serving of lean beef. Support your local Kansas farmers and ranchers. Eat beef. This message was brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
Coming to you from the campus of Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here. Now to today's agricultural news headlines for you, courtesy in part of DTN. The national stay on the Waters of the United States rule, or WOTUS, is expected to be lifted now following a U.S. Supreme Court ruling yesterday that any legal challenges to the rule must take place in federal district courts and not at the appellate level. However, that doesn't necessarily mean the previous administration's rule will take effect. That's because the EPA proposed a rule to put the brakes on the WOTUS rule prior to this Supreme Court ruling, putting in place a 2-year delay on the effective date while the EPA undertakes a broader rewrite. Despite the EPA's efforts to change course starting last year, some interest groups that opposed the 2015 rule are hesitant to say that the fight has ended. The General Counsel of the American Farm Bureau Federation, Ellen Steen, for one, said in a statement that group continues to keep its eye on the rule. Quoting her, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled correctly today that federal district courts and not federal courts of appeals have jurisdiction to review the waters of the U.S. rule. Steen went on to say this is a positive result in her view. It also, though she says, creates uncertainty and confusion in the short term because the Sixth Circuit must soon now lift its nationwide stay of the rule. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit in Cincinnati issued that national stay of the rule in response to lawsuits across the country and lingering questions about the rule's legality. Agriculture, other industry groups, and state governments across the country alleged the rule expanded federal jurisdiction to waters not traditionally protected by the Clean Water Act. Even prior to the completion of the rule, farmers and ranchers faced uncertainty as to which waters were considered jurisdictional. So far, neither Congress nor the EPA has been able to make that law more understandable. Opponents claim the rule would give regulatory agencies broad authority over basic farming practices simply because water may pool somewhere after a rain or would fill a ditch. More farmers likely will be filing Chapter 12 bankruptcy here in 2018 as they continue to struggle with costs of production exceeding commodity prices. That according to ag lender CoBank in a new report. This report says that commodity price depression from surpluses around the world will make for another belt-tightening year for farmers who will continue to see working capital diminish. As a result, CoBank said more producers are likely to turn to Chapter 12. Wheat and dairy producers among the hardest hit in this down cycle, they say in this report, as evidenced by an increase in Chapter 12 bankruptcy filings in Kansas and in Wisconsin. Chapter 12 bankruptcies, which last year reached the highest level since 2012, are expected to accelerate in 2018 in the absence of a major upward correction in farm gate prices, says the report. Now, the number of Chapter 12 filings has been on the rise since 2014. According to CoBank, there were about 380 filings that year. That number spiked to just more than 500 last year, according to this report. Chapter 12 is designed specifically for farmers with regular annual income and allows them to stop debt collection and establish repayment plans of 3 to 5 years with creditors. The law also allows farmers to restructure debt without forming creditor committees. After years of study and pilot testing, the USDA is now proposing a new voluntary swine slaughter inspection system. We have an update on that from the USDA's Gary Crawford.
A new inspection system that market hog slaughter plants could voluntarily adopt, and some new pathogen testing requirements mandatory for all plants. That's all in a proposal just out from the Agriculture Department. The new voluntary system would give establishments more leeway in setting up their own food safety assurance system adapted to their unique situations. Agriculture Department food safety official Carmen Rottenberg told us the new rules would, for example, have the plant personnel sorting out and tagging carcasses with obvious physical and other defects before they go through the processing line.
And have our inspectors do what our inspectors should be doing, which is verifying that the establishment is producing the safe and wholesome product.
The new system would have no restrictions on processing line speeds, but
if there's any issues that the line inspector has, the inspector can slow down the line, the inspector can stop the line.
USDA has been pilot testing this new system in 5 plants, results showing fewer potential food safety problems in those plants. Rottenberg says USDA will take public comments on the proposed system for 60 days, then review the comments
and determine where we go from there.
Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.
And you're listening to Agriculture Today, standing by now with this week's edition of Milk Lines, K-State dairy specialist Mike Brouk. Mike?
Today I'd like to talk with our Kansas dairy farmers concerning the upcoming K-State Dairy Days. They will be held Thursday, February 1st in Seneca, and again Friday, February 2nd in Whiteside. The agenda for the two locations will be exactly the same. Lots of good information being presented this year. There'll be some information about a handheld infrared meter that could be used to determine the moisture of silage and other wet feeds. Also be some information presented on berry processing scores for sorghum silage. The availability of starch in some of our sorghum silages has been an issue due to the lack of processing, and some of the researchers at K-State have come up with a new method to do that. Also be some information about the benefits and challenges of automatic calf feeders. We'll have a couple of our Kansas dairy producers who have been working with these units for a few years present some information there. Mr. Brent Busing and Mr. and Mrs. David Rottinghouse will be helping us with that. Also have our normal updates from the Kansas Dairy Association and the Kansas Dairy Commission, as well as our Midwest Dairy Association. In the afternoon, we'll be hearing from one of our veterinarians here at K-State. He'll be talking about our dairy beef quality assurance guidelines. Also hear some reports from some of our graduate students who are finishing up projects. Some of those talks will include transition cow health during the summertime in Kansas, as well as glucose needs of transition cows. We'll also have a little bit of information and update on some resynchronization programs for lactating dairy cows, as well as a guest speaker, Dr. John Gazer from Rock River Labs. He'll be talking to us about moving our dairies toward better margins with better grain and starch utilization in our dairy rations. Again, program is the same at both locations. If you're planning on coming to the Seneca meeting, we encourage you to contact the Meadowlark Extension District office to make a reservation there. If you're going to be attending the meeting in Whiteside, please contact the Reno County Extension office, make a reservation there so we can account for the numbers that we will need for lunch over the noon hour. Program will start sharp at 9:45 in both locations and should adjourn by 3 p.m. This is Mike Brouk with K-State Research and Extension, encouraging our dairy farmers to make plans to attend the annual Dairy Days.
Thanks, Mike. And again, those are taking place next week, Thursday and Friday, the 1st and 2nd of February. This is Agriculture Today.
While many people know hunger is an issue in developing countries, it is also a problem in our own backyards. In 2010, 1 in 7 Kansans struggled to put adequate food on the table. 2 K-State research and extension programs are tackling this problem. The Family Nutrition Program and Expanded Food and Nutrition Education Program reach thousands of Kansans in more than 70 counties. They learn how to eat healthy with a low budget. For more information about these programs, visit ksre.ksu.edu.
This Agriculture Today concludes with our weekly segment on wildlife management. Across the way once again is wildlife specialist, K-State Research and Extension, Charlie Lee. And Charlie, an overview this week of a new K-State report, as a matter of fact, on rangeland management and how that impacts prairie chicken populations to the extent of prairie chicken survival. And this has been a concern, the decline in prairie chicken, for some time now, right?
Yes, greater prairie chickens are a species here in the tallgrass prairie that have been called an umbrella species, an indicator of the health of our prairie system. Their populations have declined as much as 50% over the last 30 years, and most of the researchers would agree that it's related to the grassland ecosystem that they inhabit. The prairie chicken have a fairly large home ranges. Those can be from 4 to 10 square miles. And the grassland prairie here in the tallgrass prairie region is a conservation priority. It's not just a greater prairie chicken that seem to be declining, but a lot of grassland species. And this study was designed to look at rangeland management practices and the survival of female greater prairie chickens. There's really 2 rangeland management practices in the Flint Hills. We have the early intensive grazing, and then we have a few producers starting to adopt what's called patch burn graze. Early intensive grazing is simply putting cattle at a higher stalking rate early in the growing season and then taking them off in July, mid-July, and allow the rangeland to regrow. That's been shown over many years to be a good economic practice. Cattle seem to sell at a higher price point in the marketplace, and that allows plenty of regrowth to occur to conduct large-scale fires in the subsequent spring. Unfortunately, it leads to grasslands that are very homogeneous, typically not very much diversity within those grasslands in height and vegetative density. Patch burn graze is a different system in that you divide a pasture without fences in from 3 to 5 units. You would burn 1 unit each year in rotation, and so then you would have, at the end of the 3-year cycle, all of the entire pasture would have been burned, but only 1/3 of the pasture would have been burned each year. So what you have is a higher diversity of vegetation within that particular grazing unit, and prairie chicken seem to find that favorable.
But the purpose of this study was to confirm if, in fact, there is a gain to be had on the side of the prairie chicken here, right?
Yeah, they wanted to look at the annual survival rates of adult female greater prairie chicken and see if they would benefit from the habitat created as a result of patch burn graze. And that they also predicted that the avian predators, would have a greater impact in areas that had heavy stalking rates with recently burned areas, like what would be found in intensive early grazed areas, and that they thought the mortality risk would be greater in lightly grazed or unburned areas from mammalian predators like coyotes and badgers. So this was a 3-year study that was done in 2011 to 2013 in portions of Butler, Chase, Greenwood, Lyon, and Morris counties, right in the heart of some of the most intensively burned counties in the Flint Hills ecoregion.
So you had a number of variables examined in this study. What were the general results that were found in as far as the impact on prairie chicken?
Well, they found that females that were captured on properties that managed with patch burn grazing had annual survival rates that were 35% higher than females on properties managed with annual burning and early intensive stalking. They also found that females selected habitats that were associated with intensive management had increased mortality risk, particularly to avian predators, and that females that selected habitats that were managed by patch burn grazing experienced lower overall mortality risk, but were more vulnerable to mammalian predators. But the overall mortality risk was significantly reduced under the patch burn grazing management, and that widespread implementation of spring burning and intensive early stalking is likely depressing the survival of greater prairie chickens in the Flint Hills. So that's a pretty dramatic change. Many ranchers out there appreciate prairie chicken. They've been a species that people have kind of rallied behind here in Kansas and have been concerned about why those numbers appear to be declining. This study looks that rangeland management practices, particularly intensive early burning, may be decreasing the survival of the female prairie chicken, which is going to be required in order to get populations to rebound. So the question then becomes what type of management practices can be implemented, or what type of incentives must be offered in order to get rangeland managers to adopt this new strategy of patch burn graze.
For the rangeland manager has to look at the economic aspect of cattle performance in that patch burn system as well. So things to ponder here.
I think the economics is something that will have to be looked at in a longer-term process. At least some of the early information shows that those economic returns are very similar to what's been done in early intensive stalking and annual burning. But we'll just have to see as more data is collected to see if it's economics that's holding ranchers back from adopting this newer practice or if it's some other information. It's probably more difficult to burn pastures 1/3 of the time, particularly the first time that that's done. But after the first time, I've found that you've got fire breaks then created, and it's not as difficult to implement a patch burn graze as many people would suspect it to be.
But this study would indicate that it's pretty definitive that patch burn grazing systems compared to the intensive early stocking systems can be a positive influence on the prairie chicken out there. Charlie, thanks once again for a look at this work, studying the prairie chicken in the Flint Hills region by Kansas State University. That's Charlie Lee, wildlife specialist with K-State Research and Extension. That caps off this Tuesday edition. As always, thanks for being along with us. Please rejoin us here tomorrow, won't you? Until then, Eric Atkinson here for Agriculture Today. This is the K-State Radio Network.